A massive NFL move went down on Tuesday, which could reshape how a certain positional market operates for the long haul, and it also could impact a key Ravens extension and make it a little bit more difficult than initially anticipated. We talk about that and so much more coming up next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen every day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms, including video form on YouTube. You can like and subscribe. In audio form, you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Sam Njoku of Ravens Talk Podcast is back with us here again today as we just get closer and closer to free agency. And officially now is a week until the new league year starts. But the legal tampering period, Sam, is into full effect in just a couple days from now. The Ravens have a bunch of big decisions to make. They have to free up some cap space as well to try to maybe re-sign a guy or two who might demand a bigger contract and then make some moves of their own. But I know, as we even talked about just a couple days ago, you and I, the Ravens aren't necessarily in the splashy business, although who knows? Maybe the Ravens change that up this season, but if I had to bet on that, if I was on FanDuel doing all that, I'd probably bet against the splash moves happening early on.
Yeah, I think it's best if you bet against that. I know there's a lot of good, big name receivers and corners available. Devontae Adams was recently released. So a lot of good players out there that, a lot of Ravens fans are accustomed to hearing. So I'm sure that anticipation for potentially having one of those players join your roster is very enticing for a lot of Ravens fans. But I think the Ravens make their way into being the top tier team in the league by, drafting well. So the Ravens will probably err on the side of caution, go towards the draft and try and find a guy to really fill in this roster and, extend their own guys, which is what good teams usually do.
And the Ravens with their 11 draft picks, they love the draft. They love getting their comp picks. And essentially with guys like, Lamar Jackson and all these other $100 million guys on the roster, key extensions coming up like Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum, etc., hitting on whether it be early, mid, or late round draft picks becomes just even more vitally important than it already is for a Ravens team. As you mentioned, Sam, that's essentially their bread and butter. They like to extend their guys, give them contracts, maybe try to extend them early to save a little bit of money to go and re-sign some other guys. But this year, as you and I have talked about, they don't have that laundry list of free agents that they're going to have to maneuver through, at least not top free agents. Still a lot of guys who are hitting the open market. We'll get into kind of a who stays, who goes with some of the guys lower on that list in the final part of the show. But Sam, there was a massive move in the NFL that really shook up the running back position, and that is Saquon Barkley, who obviously is Super Bowl winner, somebody who has meant so much to the Giants organization. The Giants let him go for some reason. The Eagles say, okay, you got to let him go. We'll take him from you. And here he is, being an impact player. We know, and you and I have talked about it, Sam, the running back position has been criminally undervalued for, you can go back however far you want to talk about that. But Saquon was rewarded with a 2-year, $41.2 million contract extension. Makes him the highest paid running back in NFL history, and it makes him the first 20+ million per year running back. And also on top of it, he has the ability to earn an additional $15 million in incentives and escalators. The deal also includes $36 million fully guaranteed at signing. That is a huge deal for multiple different reasons. The guaranteed money being one, that is a massive amount of that money guaranteed to Saquon. And two, it impacts the rest of the running back market. I don't know if you saw James Cook responded to this, and he wants to get paid, and this obviously helps his case out. But from a Ravens perspective, Derrick Henry's made it very clear that he wants to stay with the Ravens. He wants this to be his last stop in the NFL. John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta certainly also want Derrick Henry back. His Ravens teammates want him back too. Extension talks, now with this on the table, I'm sure Derrick Henry was sitting there smiling at his phone when he saw this notification come through, because this means Derrick Henry's going to earn more money on that extension. And in my opinion, it complicates things a little, not to the point where it's not going to get done or anything.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely going to be 100% in his wheelhouse. I think Derrick Henry has earned that money. He's going to get that money. He's definitely going to get a little more now than he would have if the Saquon Barkley deal hadn't went down. And as far as James Cook goes, I mean, if you want to get the money of Saquon Barkley, you got to play like him. I don't think there's anybody in the league who's playing the game quite like Saquon. And because Saquon pretty much, I don't know if it's an anomaly to the market or just a shift of the way things are going to go for running backs in the future. They'll remain to be seen. I think Derrick Henry's contract upcoming will be a lot to do with how that, plays out or how people perceive that moving forward. But I don't expect Derrick Henry to get the money that Saquon did. But he will get paid a little bit more. The Ravens have to extend it. I think it's a foregone conclusion. Luckily, Derrick Henry wants to be a Raven. The Ravens want Derrick Henry to be a Raven. Usually when those two things align, contract isn't too far in the future for these both of those parties. So I do expect the extension to happen. Again, if you're a Ravens front office person, you're not very happy with the contract because you just put a little more extra dollars in the pockets of Derrick Henry, but that's all good. Derrick Henry deserves it. Again, these two players are in a little different positions in their career. I think Derrick Henry is a little more further along in his career than Saquon is as far as contracts go, but I still think Derrick Henry gets that extension and they'll do wonders for the Ravens cap.
Yeah, it will. And just to remind people, and yes, you're exactly right, Sam, Derrick Henry, 2025 will be his age 31 season. Meanwhile, Saquon Barkley just turned 28. So there's a 3-year difference between Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. And for Derrick Henry's cap hit, currently projected out at around $12.9 million. So obviously an extension makes a lot of sense to be able to take some of that money, put it into future years. And just to outline the running back average annual value market right now, Derrick Henry is not even on the list I'm looking at right now. Saquon Barkley, 20.6. Christian McCaffrey, that was another big one, $19 million per year. Jonathan Taylor, 14. Alvin Kamara, 12.2. Josh Jacobs, $12 million. You can even go further down the list. 9.9 for Joe Mixon. James Conner, 9.5. Montgomery over in Detroit, 9. Ramondre Stevenson, 9. Chuba Hubbard, 8.3. Derrick Henry's not on that list. Now, he signed a 2-year, $16 million deal that obviously can go up a couple of million with incentives, which he had no problem hitting those last year based off the year he had. But I agree with you. It's not like this isn't going to get done. But the other interesting part here, Sam, is the guaranteed money. I mentioned that earlier. Because with so much of that money now guaranteed for Saquon, we know how outspoken Derrick Henry and a lot of these other running backs have been about their position and fighting for fair contracts and to catch up with the rest of the league here. Everybody talks about, okay, that age 30 year is just like the cutoff for these deals. And while I think that Derrick won't earn as much as Saquon because of the age factor, I think that's going to be a big part of this conversation. We can't pretend that Derrick's not a top 2 running back in this league right now. Like, he and Saquon are 1, 2. You can put them in whatever order you want to, but Saquon earned this deal. And for Derrick Henry, I think it'll come in a little lower than Saquon, but could it be more in the range of that $19 million for Christian McCaffrey? Or do you maybe think it could be in the middle of maybe a Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor? Maybe it comes in maybe $16 million per season. What are your kind of initial thoughts on that?
I'm thinking 18, 19 million. I think 19 might be pushing a little bit, but 18 million, I feel like is right around where he needs to be. I think, again, you let off a list of running backs who make more than him. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, Derrick Henry's the second best running back in football. Some may consider him to be the best, depending on who you talk to. So, yeah, I think Derrick Henry deserves it. I think he'll get that money. What that means for the future of the Ravens as far as how far they want to push this contract towards, because, again, you mentioned it, he's turning 31. He still he looks good. He looks really good. I mean, against, playing with the Titans and having the focus being on you for all those years and now coming to an offense with Lamar Jackson, not having as much focus being on you, man, did wonders for his career. The fountain of youth is in Baltimore for Derrick Henry. So I wonder how big this contract is going to be. I think extension Mike's probably going to be 2 years. I mean, if I had to guess, 2-3 years looks like the yardage in which they'll go with this thing. But again, 17, 18 million, 19 million max, but I don't think he hits that 20 million.
I always don't like asking these types of questions because whenever I do, the episode comes out and then it happens and I'm just like, well, this is the pointless question. But would you expect this extension to get done before free agency starts? Because it would be nice for the Ravens to have a little bit more leeway in terms of the start of free agency. Now, this could happen at any time they can free up that money, but by the time we have March 10th rolling around and the legal tampering period starts, or even the new league year, if they could free up some of that money, get this thing done, it would help. But again, this might throw a little bit of a short-term wrench into that conversation.
I would say it depends on how soon they get this Stanley deal done. Free agency is fast approaching. If they're not able to get a deal done with Stanley prior to the deadline, and we'll start the free agency. I wouldn't say deadline, but yeah, I think that will pretty much hamper their desire to get something done with Derrick Henry. They want to make sure they get the numbers right with Stanley first, and then move on to Henry and others. But yeah, I think they would love to get this done prior to free agency. One, it gives them a little more leeway, gives them a little more avenues to work with as far as signing some other guys in their roster that they want to bring back. So yeah, I would think they would love to get Derrick Henry signed, but I think priority number one is getting Stanley done.
Do you think void years could become a factor here? The Ravens have not been shy about using those over the past couple of years. They generally hadn't done it, but now they are in favor of doing it. I feel like that's a way for the Ravens to, again, alleviate some of that cap room, push some of that money down the line here. They're still paying for Odell Beckham Jr.'s contract this year, by the way, because of that. Do you think that void years could be an option for Derrick Henry? Maybe some of these other extensions / restructures that we could see.
Yeah, possibly. I think they'll probably try not to. I think they really want to extend him. I think that's the route they're going to take. They're going to try and extend him. But some other contracts, they might try and use the void years. I'm always erring on the side of extending the guys that are going to be on your roster for years to come. So Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry being another one. Marlon Humphrey, a guy who's still in his prime. We saw him have a bounce back year this year. Those guys have contracts that are worth extending. Lamar Jackson, his cap hits about $43 million. I know he only signed a contract 2 years ago, but extending him relieves them so much. His cap hit raises to $70+ million in 2026. So they can't allow that cap hit to be there. So the extension's coming either this year or next year. Doing it sooner rather than later definitely helps free up some cap space. So I don't like void years all that much because you're just pushing back the inevitable. But when you have the Super Bowl window, you want to keep it open as long as possible. And if you can't get an extension done, then the restructuring is definitely the next best option.
Yeah, definitely. And there are other things as well at Afeowe, who certainly made some headlines over the weekend. He is an extension candidate as well. There is also some cap maneuvering that they could possibly do by turning down Tyler Linderbaum's fifth-year extension and fifth-year option and extending him instead, which some people have talked about because his fifth-year option would blow away what the center market currently is. So if they want to operate on a lesser per-year basis than what that would be, they could do that. Mark Andrews, you and I have talked about a lot, Sam. If they decide to move on, that frees up some money for them as well. Justin Tucker, as a post-June 1 cut, also would save them some money if that's the route they decide to go there. So there are a lot of avenues for the Ravens to free up this money. I know that right now they don't have the most cap space in the world. If they were to get into a bidding war with, let's say, the Patriots, well, the Patriots have $120+ million in cap space, and they can't go dollar for dollar with New England right now. But that doesn't mean they don't have avenues to alleviate some of their cap stress, and they're going to have to do some of it because they have to have enough to sign draft picks, sign undrafted guys, re-sign some of their own players, and we'll get into a lot of that coming up in the final part of the show. But in the second segment, we'll be talking about Kyle Hamilton raving over Lamar Jackson, Nate Wiggins, and getting real on some of his teammates as well. Stay tuned, plenty to talk about on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Chewy. You've probably heard of Chewy. They really do have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy, whether you're shopping for food, treats, or even pet healthcare. Chewy makes it fast, easy, and affordable. Over 100,000 products from all your favorite brands. Chewy has everything your pet needs, from food and treats to toys, beds, and grooming. And it's not just for dogs and cats. They've got supplies for birds, fish, reptiles, and even small pets too. Chewy also makes it easy to manage your pet's health with prescriptions, telehealth, vet visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. AutoShip is a game changer. You can set up automatic deliveries for food, treats, or any essentials so you never run out. You can easily change or cancel any time. Chewy's customer service team is great, and Chewy makes managing pet care easier. You never run out of essentials. You have easy access to vet care, and everything is delivered to your door. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking the link in the description. Save $20 on your first order with free shipping by clicking the link in the description. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. Back here, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, Sam Njoku, rocking out with you here on this midweek edition of the show. Sam, Kyle Hamilton, he's somebody that it's been an A-plus selection for the Ravens. I know some people didn't like that 40 time, which I still think is ridiculous when it comes down to how often has Kyle Hamilton been asked to run in a straight line for 40 yards and how much has that impacted his play on the football field. But you know what? I'll take it. The Ravens will take it. I'm not complaining about it. And he has been evolving over the course of his first 3 years in the league. Crazy is already entering his fourth. I don't even know how we've gone there. Lamar Jackson, by the way, is almost 30 years old, which I don't even want to think about when it comes down to that. But to me, one of the ways Kyle Hamilton has evolved is as a leader. And we saw that, I think, this season a lot. He took on that bigger role. I think it helped him out a lot. He obviously shifted around the defense, and he went on green light with Chris Long, talked a lot about a lot of different topics. And the thing that I want to start off, just because we're talking about leadership right now, is he was asked about Lamar's leadership and kind of how he operates, how he goes about things. And he was very clear about like, hey, different people lead different ways. Lamar Jackson obviously is not this rah-rah type of guy. Like he's not going to go out there in the middle of the huddle and like, he's not like that Roquan fiery guy like that when it comes to just firing the team up pregame. But he said, quote, I just think the way Lamar was brought up and the way he knows how to play football is just like, look, this is what it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He's like, look, just be ready to play. Kyle said that, like, look, it doesn't have to be remember the Titans. Like, let's just be a motivational all time, go out there. Lamar's just like, let's go win the game. Like, he says, I only care about you, care about the Super Bowl. Like, that's what I want. I'm curious, Sam, based off of watching Lamar from 2018 as a rookie, evolve as a leader to now, what have you kind of seen, and how do you think that his evolvement as a leader has helped him in multiple different aspects of his game?
I mean, it's great watching it. I think we see it every year with different quarterbacks that come in the league. I remember when Joe Flacco first started, definitely a more quiet guy, definitely came into his own, his personality shined. And you saw that, when he was under big pressure situations, he would be, Joe Cool. He'd be the guy that would just sit there and, take it in and not make the game, as big as it may appear to be. And his teammates were to follow suit. And now we're seeing with Lamar Jackson, very quiet, playful demeanor. But last year or this past season, I definitely saw a shift in his approach. He definitely was more demanding from his players. He wasn't, he's not the rah-rah guy. And I don't think you want that from your quarterback anyway. You don't want him to be the rah-rah fiery leader. You want him to be composed because mistakes happen in the game. And you don't want, the team's philosophy, team's mentality to shift one way or another based on the mentality of your quarterback, which is what usually does happen. So definitely seeing Lamar Jackson grow as the leader, being more vocal, asking more from his teammates, asking more from his coaching staff in some regards, and asking more from himself is definitely nice to see. So I agree with Kyle Hamilton. His approach is definitely well sought after. I'm sure the Ravens brass love it, and I'll see that continue to grow as the seasons progress.
And I think, to me as well, one of the things that people honestly get on Lamar about, which I don't think is fair, is sometimes on the field he can display emotion. And I think that people sometimes take that as like, oh, he's having an outburst, or like he's angry, or he's like showing up his teammates. That is not Lamar Jackson. Obviously, Sam, you and I follow Lamar very closely, covering the team, and obviously Ravens fans who watch Lamar, they know Lamar as well. That's not who Lamar is. Lamar will be the first person to go up on that podium and blame himself and say, I could be better. I let my team down. I'm the reason. Don't talk about them. Talk about me. He's the one to fall on the sword, regardless of if it is his sword to fall on or not. But, when he kicks the ball up in the air or, he slams his helmet down, I think he gets unfairly criticized for that. But, it's like Tom Brady had a lot of emotional outbursts, and, that was, oh, well, Tom's what a leader, what a fiery leader Tom Brady is, like it's that standard of like, well, why does Tom get away with it? And, he was slamming iPads and clipboards and whatever. And then Lamar gets emotional on the field too. Lamar's a competitor. Like Lamar is one of the most competitive players I've ever seen in terms of how bad he wants to win. And it's not even for himself. It's for his teammates, for his coaches, for the city of Baltimore. And that to me is another leadership thing where Lamar shows that passion, but sometimes that passion gets taken out of context and reflects negatively, which I don't think is fair.
I mean, I don't know what fans want. I mean, I remember when Joe Flacco was a quarterback and he would show there was a lack of emotion, and you see, fans and some pundits out there express their criticism of that. Okay, well, does he really want to win? Does he care? Does he worried about his kids and what have you? Now we have the total opposite end of that spectrum. Now we have a guy who wants to win more than anything. There's no one on the field who wants to win more than Lamar Jackson, and that spills over sometimes in frustration when things don't go his way. And now we're criticizing him for that. Are we showing up his teammates? No, he wants to win. He understands that there's only 17 games in the season in the regular season. There's not 82 like in basketball. There's not 160 plus games like in the MLB. Every game counts, every play counts, every yard counts. So I don't agree with the notion that we have to criticize him for being fiery. I mean, I love it. I love the passion because it means that he cares way more than even the fans care. We know the fans in Baltimore care a lot. So that's the type of guy you want on your football team, especially when he's your quarterback.
Yeah, 100%. And that, again, is a part of Lamar, is just who he is as a competitor and as a leader. And I think that, his teammates appreciate the fact that, one, they know he's not showing them up. And two, it's that he demands greatness out of those guys because he has those high expectations. He believes in his guys. And I think that's where that comes from as well. But speaking of guys that I think are going to have great years next season, I think Lamar obviously is going to continue to build on what he's doing. But Nate Wiggins is somebody that I think is going to be absolutely unreal for the Ravens next season, have a bigger role most likely. I think he's going to get in the weight room a little bit, maybe add on some muscle, which I think is going to be great. First NFL offseason, full offseason, which will be awesome. But Kyle Hamilton spoke on Nate Wiggins and said, quote, he's one of those corners that's just like if he could line up every single play and play man, he would do it. It's awesome to see that competitor and a young dude like that. And I think he's going to be really good. We saw, part of the reason why Brandon Stevens had the year he had was because teams did not want to throw at Marlon Humphrey. They did not want to throw at Nate Wiggins because they were so good. So all of a sudden it's like, well, the only person we can throw at is Brandon Stevens because there was that inkling of weakness there. So Brandon was targeted over and over and over again, but it speaks to just how good Nate Wiggins was. He had to grow into it a little bit. He had some rough moments early, but the fact that by the end of the season, he was being talked about in conversations with Marlon Humphrey, having stats right up next to Marlon Humphrey in the top 5, top 2. It just speaks to how good he was and how he came into his own as a player last season.
Nate Wiggins might be the most underrated player in the Ravens roster right now. I think he's just phenomenal. Yeah, you mentioned he had some struggles early on. He's a rookie out of Clemson. He didn't really have much to go by. But, man, as soon as he got more comfortable with the defense, as soon as he realized that he wasn't, susceptible to getting beat up top because the safety wasn't where he needed to be, man, he locked in. And his speed, it just flashes on tape. And a lot of times you see cornerbacks who have that speed and that doesn't show up because they're trepidatious. They're not really, very, confident in their skills and they're very worrisome about the opposing receiver. That's not what you get with Nate Wiggins. And Nate Wiggins, as Kyle Hamilton mentioned, wants to play man. You can tell the difference the way he plays from when he's manned up line on line with somebody and when he's in a little bit of a scheme on defense. And that just shows me that he's going to be a monster. And you mentioned it, a year under his belt in the offseason, getting into the weight room, understanding more of what Zachary Orr's defense is asking of him, having maybe another cornerback, the likes of Marlon Humphrey and himself on the roster perhaps next year. The sky's the limit for Nate Wiggins. I'm very excited to see what Nate Wiggins does, and I'm very happy that Kyle Hamilton brought him up because he is a difference maker on this defense, and it's going to be a very interesting decision for Ravens roster, for Ravens front office people about what they decide to do with this cornerback room because they're going to have to extend Nate Wiggins sooner or later and bringing in another corner where maybe it's a top tier corner. Maybe you draft another corner. That's a lot of money in that cornerback room, but Nate Wiggins seems to be a Raven for years to come.
Yeah, you could just say Jair Alexander if you want to.
I
know you want to.
I really do.
I know you want to.
There's a chance for Alexander to make it. I'm not going to say that. I think I'm warming up to the idea of Alexander being a Raven because of just the way his skill set matches up with what the Ravens are trying to do. And because the market really isn't favoring him too much. I'm looking at, from what I've heard from outside sources, it doesn't appear to be a situation where Alexander is going to get a ton of money in the open market. And with the drafting aspect of things, with a lot of good corners coming out in this league's draft, could get traded to somebody like Baltimore, and then that will be a disaster for opposing offenses.
Could you imagine, again, Marlon Humphrey, Jair Alexander, Nate Wiggins, that is and plus, obviously Kyle Hamilton or Darius back there as well. That is one of the ultimate no-fly zones. And I think that, again, with how that defense recovered in the second half of last season and what we saw out of that group once they got the pieces right, you add more pieces into that, and they're going to be even better. So, look, Jair, if Locked On Ravens, if you have been a fan of this show for a while or you've listened to me for a while, I've been on the Jair Alexander train for like 4 years. I've been like, okay, please reunite Lamar, because Lamar and Jair are friends. They know each other from Louisville. They're close. And so I think that adds another intriguing storyline to that equation. But there are other more intriguing storylines for the Ravens this offseason. We've talked a lot about Ronnie Stanley, Brandon Stevens, Patrick McCary, even Patrick Ricard, but there are other Ravens free agents that the team has to make decisions on. So Sam and I will make decisions for them. Coming up in the final part of the show, stay tuned. Back here, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, Sam Njoku, talking Ravens football with you on this Wednesday. Sam, everybody's talking about Ronnie Stanley right now. Obviously, that's the big domino. And again, it always happens where the show will come out and then 2 hours later, Ronnie will be announced and we'll have to pivot a whole thing here. But we're not going to talk about Ronnie here. Not even the top guys like a Stevens or McCary or whatnot, because there are other free agents the Ravens have to make decisions on. And I think it's important to talk about those guys too, because it's obviously important to have your star players, but you got to round out the roster with depth. And I think the Ravens are going to bring back some of their guys from their free agency pool to shore up some of those positions depth-wise. So I want to start off with two receivers, Nelson Agholor, Tylan Wallace. Obviously, the Ravens do have a need at wide receiver, not necessarily for a number one or a number two. You have that covered up, but feels like they're going to try to add a couple of guys. But it feels like they could even bring back a guy like a Wallace or an Agholor. But in my opinion, it feels like they might have to choose between one of those two if they want to bring one of them back. Do you feel like there's a choice to be made here? Do you think both come back, or do you think neither come back?
I think the possibility of Tylan Wallace coming back is high. I think Nelson Agholor's probability of coming back is probably a lot lower than Wallace. My concern with Wallace is he's going to get some interest in the open market. I think he has shown that he has the ability to play. I think whenever you've asked Tylan Wallace to make a play, he's made a play. And there are definitely a lot of good football teams out there who note that, understand that, and will try and make a push for him. So I think it may be a case where it's up to Tylan Wallace. Do you want to stay here in Baltimore having a chance to compete for that third wide receiver spot? Or do you want to go out to another organization and try your hand there with more of a pass-happy team? But I think the interest in Tylan Wallace is definitely there for outside NFL teams, and it's going to be up to the Ravens to match whatever offer they get. I think the Ravens saw a good chunk of what Nelson Agholor can do in 2023, bit of a fall off in 2024, and now 25, you think they'll try and bring in somebody else who can come in and try and complement the receivers they have of Dave Flowers and Rashod Bateman. So I think the chances of Agholor coming back is a lot lower than Wallace. I'd be surprised, honestly, if he comes back, because there's so many good receivers in the draft, upcoming guys, younger guys, and Tez Walker, other guys who have an opportunity to come in and make plays. So I would say the likelihood of Agholor is low, and Wallace, the Ravens would love to have him back, but he's going to get a chance to test the open market.
Yeah, I think that the Ravens will probably sign another veteran like Nelson Agholor, but maybe someone who's a couple years younger and maybe has a little bit more left in the tank. Agholor, again, you're right. Great 2023, based off expectation, was re-signed, and I think people expected him to be even better than that, and obviously he was not. So I'd expect him to probably be on the way out. And for Wallace, you made a good point where it feels like Baltimore probably does want him back, but if the price is not right, then they have to move on, pivot, and maybe that means two wide receivers drafted instead of one, or two vets brought in instead of one. So it's an interesting conversation with those two. Now, two others at a different position, Chris Board, Malik Harrison. Ravens inside linebacker position was a little wonky this year. Trenton Simpson, a lot of people expected that year two jump. It did not happen. Roquan Smith struggled early and got it together once the Ravens figured out their whole defensive personnel issue. But we saw once Trenton Simpson went down, it was kind of a linebacker by committee with Malik and Chris in there. I thought that both those guys showed flashes. Do you think that they both get brought back, or do you think, again, a choice has to be made?
I think they could get brought. I think they could both get brought back, but I think that it's going to be a case of, again, how much are they going to be asking for? I mean, the Ravens are probably going to try and save some money and maybe ask them, okay, well, work with us a little bit here. Again, there's a lot of linebackers out there, and sure, they can probably get a position elsewhere, but I think they're comfortable with this scheme. So I would, if I were them, if I were the agent, I would try my best to have a team-friendly deal and work to get both of them back. I would love to have both of them back because, familiarity with this defense, another year under Zach Rohr, and let's see what happens. And they played very well when Roquan Smith had that absence against the Chargers, I believe, last season. So we'll see what happens. Again, if I would say maybe Chris Board more than Harrison gets brought back, but it could go either way.
Yeah. And Kristen Welch also involved in this conversation, by the way, just to throw, the other free agent inside linebacker into that conversation. Trey White is somebody that I think actually had a pretty decent audition for the Ravens in the second half of the season. They brought him in from the Rams for essentially nothing, 7th round swap. And to me, made a couple big plays on George Pickens and had his moments. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but again, I don't think that you're bringing in Trey White to surpass Marlon Humphrey as this team's number 1 corner. It'd be as a depth piece. You can bring in another player if you want it to be Jair Alexander or someone else, and you can have Trey White be your 4th or 5th corner. I'm not really mad at that if I'm the Ravens. I think that actually would be a pretty good signing for them. But what do you say?
I would love that. I think Trey White would be perfect here. Let's see how he felt about his short time here in Baltimore. Usually when it comes to these type of things, it's really the player's interest in the team. I would not be surprised if Trey White got some interest outside. I mean, he's a decent corner. You saw he played well against George Pickens against the Steelers, one of the hated rivals for the Baltimore Ravens. So I would not be surprised if he has some interest in the open market. I'm sure the Ravens are going to break the bank to bring him back. But if Trey White wants to be a Raven, the Ravens will make it happen because, again, I saw some good things from him. He wasn't caught out of position too many times, but you got to remember, he was just coming off of injury, came in the middle of the season, having to learn an entirely new scheme. So we have to give Trey White some grace. But the flashes that he showed told me all I needed to know about what he could be as a depth piece in case there was an injury somewhere on an outside corner spot. He's a guy that you can plug in and have some decent success.
What do you think about Josh Jones? I think we saw some moments from him. Obviously, the Ravens like to use him as a super 6th offensive lineman because McCary was starting. So you had him there. As a starter, I don't want Josh Jones as a starter. As a backup, I'm fine with them coming back. What do you think?
I think they'll bring him back. I think he's one of those guys, again, a big guy, a guy who knows the system very well. He can be a backup. Obviously, you don't want him to be that piece. I don't want to see a situation where they don't sign Ronnie Stanley and say, oh, well, you got Josh Jones. He's a new guy. Go out there and get him, Tiger. So I don't think that's the situation the Ravens want to find themselves in. But, there's a reason why you have backups for situations like the one you may find yourself if, for instance, Ronnie Stanley goes down with an injury or Roger Rosengarten goes down with an injury. That's what makes Patrick McCary such an enticing offer for the Ravens to bring back because of his ability to play any position. Jones doesn't have that ability, but he is familiar with the offense, and he's a guy who can do his job if he's put in the right position. So I think if Jones has the right mindset to come back in a decent price, the Ravens make that choice to bring him back. There's not a lot of big tackles like that available who aren't going to cost you a pretty penny. And you might as well have somebody that has familiarity with your team rather than bringing somebody from the outside.
Yeah, most definitely. And I feel like also the position people are talking about now is backup quarterback Josh Johnson, a free agent. But, Josh is getting up there. He has been up there in age. I feel like the Ravens will probably want to be in the market for just a better player there at this point in their career, an upgrade there. Are you kind of that same sentiment?
Yeah, I think we're about that time, Johnson. I think it's time to hang him up. How many teams are you going to play for? How long? I mean, I guess did he play it down, or how many snaps did he play this year? Not a lot. So I don't think he's taking that many hits. But I think the Ravens would be wise to try and find somebody out there that can come in and potentially be that backup in case Lamar Jackson goes down. Right now, we're of the mindset that if Lamar Jackson goes down, it's panic. It's over. No matter if it's for a play, a game, a season, we're panicking because without Lamar Jackson, this offense does not go, even with the addition of Derrick Henry. So I think it will be in the Ravens' best interest to look either for the draft or maybe free agency to bring in a guy. Don't go too early to get a backup quarterback. Lamar's still your guy for another 6, 7, 10 years, hopefully. But yeah, I will always love the Ravens to bring in a quarterback. Last year, they brought in a guy who I did not agree with, and we kind of saw that play out as far as preseason goes. So who knows what happens with that, but I think it's best that the Ravens bring in another guy. The guys they have on the roster currently or who they had on the roster probably isn't a good choice to come in and spell Lamar Jackson in case of injury.
Yep, I'm with you. I think an upgrade there is certainly due. All right, we can just do a quick rapid fire of the big four. Ronnie Stanley, Patrick McCary, Brandon Stevens, Patrick Ricard. What are you thinking? Yes, no? Who's coming back? Who's not? Stanley
has to come back. Ricard has to come back. Stevens, no thank you. And who was the fourth one?
McCary.
McCary is interesting because, again, like I mentioned, he could play any which position. He started at left guard. He did a decent job. I just really want the Ravens to upgrade that side because I think it does wonders for Tyler Linderbaum at center. So I think they probably should make an upgrade with that. I wouldn't want them to have him be the starting left guard next year. If he's okay with being the backup, I'll be all for it. But as far as what they do, I think if you bring in Stanley with that contract, you can't have Mekari. If Stanley does go elsewhere, maybe there's more money to bring in Mekari. But with this situation, I'd say Stanley, yes. Mekari, no. Ricard, yes. Stevens, no.
Yeah, I'm with you. All four for four for me as well.
Yes.
So I think that, look, if the money's right for Mekari, bring him back as a backup. If not, then, Ravens will enjoy the comp pick, and that'll kind of be the end of that situation. But Sam, I appreciate your time. Thanks for hopping on with me. Please tell people where they can find you and what you're working on.
All right. You can find me on YouTube and Spotify, Apple Podcasts, at Ravens Talk Podcast. We'll have an episode out shortly regarding free agency and getting ready for that. Lots of big opportunities for guys to come back, and maybe a couple of potential outside free agents. Jair Alexander maybe could be one, or, maybe even a Devontae Adams, probably not, but we'll see. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Ravens Talk Pod, where we talk football 24/7. Ravens Talk definitely for the majority of the time.
Yeah, Sam does great work. Be sure all the links in the description down below. Go check him out, like, subscribe, and follow him on social media as well. Sam, appreciate you as always. And thank you to everybody who tuned in, listened, watched the Locked On Ravens today. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content. We'll talk about who the Ravens could bring in from the outside and a lot more. Plus, some cap casualties that could be fits for the Ravens. Even guys cut as recent as yesterday. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot coming your way on Locked On Ravens.